As we told you last week, Monday was International Holocaust Remembrance Day and the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. Alberto Israel is a 93-year-old Holocaust survivor, and he returned to Auschwitz, as he does every year, for the commemoration services. He detailed many of the horrors he personally witnessed, including watching babies being thrown alive into ovens. I urge you to watch his moving interview on news.sky.com. But one thing he mentioned particularly caught my attention.
J'ai toujours passé par vous. Nous sommes, maintenant, je vois parfois la même chose qu'en 1933. Les mêmes manifestations, les mêmes choses qui courent, les mêmes méchancetés, les mêmes insultes, la même chose. Oui, ça a changé les personnes, c'est le même.
So he was basically saying that he sees parallels today, similarities between today and back in the 1930s, the same sort of protests, the same ugliness, the same insulting behaviour in the streets. He sees parallels that he hasn't seen before with that period in time. Well, as we well know, anti-Semitism is on the rise across the world, with many sickening examples of thuggery against, violence towards, and even murder of Jews, particularly in Europe, but also in America. We've seen examples in Australia too, with swastikas daubed on a Bondi wall and other repulsive acts. But is Alberto Israel right to draw parallels between today and the 1930s in Europe? Well, also on Monday, Henry Ergas, who is one of our greatest writers and intellectuals, wrote a superb piece in his regular column in the Australian newspaper about how the everyday citizens of a supposedly civilised land like pre-war Germany could sit back and not speak up as their nation descended into the pure evil of the Holocaust. Although Ergas is adamant that the dangers we face today are not comparable to the 1930s, and I agree with him on that, it does raise an interesting conundrum. At what point do you speak up? When is it too soon? And what point do you raise your head above the parapet and draw attention to the parallels that you do see, no matter how obscure, with bad events in the past? Ergas quoted Hannah Arendt's famous observations about the banality of evil and the reasons why it is possible for a supposedly civilised society to gradually slip free from all its moral anchorings. Arendt concluded that a critical precursor is when individuals choose to suspend their sense of judgment and give up the ability or even the desire to think critically for themselves. Another precursor, she noted, is when the moral guidance of tradition and of traditional institutions breaks down. Some people, no doubt, would see parallels with today's world of tearing down statues, rewriting history, of young children, especially girls, being given drugs and surgery to change their gender in dramatically increasing numbers, historical data being deliberately altered, and so on, as traditions and traditional institutions are toppled. You may see such parallels. I couldn't possibly comment. What we do know, Henry Ergas writes, is that the moral strength to think for ourselves remains as precious and as threatened as ever. And he then goes on to note, and this is the clincher, that it is undeniable that the pressures to bow to mass opinion grow stronger every day, as does the hysteria that assails those who dare question the self-images of the age. Again, you may see parallels with today's world of woke culture and of what opinions or beliefs are inappropriate, of what is comfortable or uncomfortable, but I couldn't possibly comment. It is, however, a matter of record that in the Third Reich, 97% of all teachers belonged to the Socialist Teachers' Union, and all subjects taught in German schools in that period referenced National Socialist propaganda. You may see parallels with today's academic world of politically correct thought and consensus, but I couldn't possibly comment. Going back even further in time, Henry Ergas quotes Alexei Tocqueville, who railed against those voices that proclaim, "From this day forth you shall be a stranger among us. When you approach your fellow creatures, they will shun you as one who is impure. And even those who believe in your innocence will abandon you, lest they too be shunned in turn. You may see parallels with today's judgmental, virtue-signalling, craven and cowardly corporate world and the sick cancel culture of social media and deplatforming of individuals and checking your privilege. But I couldn't possibly comment. And of course, we all know that Goebbels' slick propaganda machine, much like the East German Stasi, much like the Chinese Communist Cultural Revolution under Mao, much like the Soviets, the Leninists and the Stalinists alike, and much like the Khmer Rouge under Pol Pot, and like every other socialist-inspired political movement that stole individual liberty and stifled free speech among the masses, first of all, they took advantage and corrupted that most precious of human attributes, the naive idealism of youth, and twisted it to their own political ends. You may see some obscure parallels with today's world. As for me, well, even if I did, I wouldn't dare speak up and say so.